What's going on, Packers Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Packers Latest. I'm your host, Taylor Bretl, and even though it's a Wednesday, you can call it Game Day Eve. The Packers playing the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving on Thursday. It's pretty exciting stuff, but it's a very quick turnaround to get some content out for you guys. But I love doing it, and I love building a community here across fans of the green and gold Green Bay Packers. If you're new to the channel, feel free to leave a like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, comment anything that you'd like about the Packers. Maybe you're a Lions fan coming over onto this channel trying to learn more about the green and gold. Feel free to leave any comment that you'd like. I'll make sure to read all of them. And if you're a returner, I welcome you back, and I appreciate you tuning in for many, many episodes of Packers Latest. But we got a pretty busy show on hand today, like I said, with the Packers playing the Detroit Lions on Thursday, which is tomorrow. Crazy to think about, a quick turnaround, but here we go. Starting off, we got to look back on this Week 1 game against Detroit. Both teams, Green Bay and Detroit, look way different now than they did in Week 1, but it's still important to touch on with Green Bay going just 1-5 in the NFC North last season. They did not get a single win against Detroit last season, and they open up this season 1-0 in the NFC North, getting that win over Detroit. So it's a big one to cover. I know it's been a long time since Week 1, and a lot of things have changed since then, but it's still important to talk about it. So looking at some of the main factors of why the Packers dominated so much in Week 1, once again, that score 27-13. The game was played in Lambeau Field, a dominating home opener for Green Bay. Something I noticed looking back at the box score of this game, looking over some film, really breaking down how Green Bay dominated. They got off to such a great start on offense. End of the first quarter, score was 10-0, so you got to attribute that to the defense as well. But 10 points in the first quarter from Green Bay's offense, something that we don't really see much later this season. I actually did not go game by game to see how many times they scored 10 points in the first quarter, but it doesn't feel like they've done that much, especially as of recent. Green Bay, they opened up with that 83-yard touchdown drive, and like I said, they would add a field goal on from that, a 10-0 lead at the end of the first quarter. That is what really set the tone and gave them that cushion to hold on 27-13. A big reason for this, Jordan Love, and he had some early command. He threw 2 first-half touchdowns, one of them to Tucker Kraft, who's now hurt, and another one to Jayden Reed, who is now hurt. A big thing to note there. This Packers team fully healthy. Same goes for the Lions. We'll get a little bit more into their injuries as well. But you look at these two teams, and Detroit is pretty healthy in comparison to Green Bay. Both teams are a little bit beat up, but in Week 1, both teams were healthy, and you can see it right there. 2 touchdown passes in that first half, one going to Tucker Kraft and one going to Jayden Reed. And while the offense slowed in the second half, like I mentioned, that cushion the Packers had early on, the quick start, the long drive, the successful drive ending in a touchdown, not just a field goal. I know they added that other one, but it's just so nice to see. Everything was flowing, and a lot has changed since then. But it'd be nice to see that on Thursday if the Packers can keep that up, but I'm not going to act like it'll be a copy-paste game. These two teams have battled through a lot this season, and these are two teams contending for a spot in the playoffs and a spot in the division. There's still plenty of weeks left to jump the Chicago Bears, who sit in first place of the NFC North at 8-3, which is wild to say because that Bears team started out the season 0-2 and also 0-2 in the NFC North. Those 2 losses coming to the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions. Crazy turnaround for Chicago. Looking at the defense in that Week 1 game, it was Micah Parsons' debut as a Green Bay Packer, where he did collect a sack, even though he was only playing on third downs. That was pretty incredible. You look at the Packers, they had 4 sacks on the day. Parsons having one of those. You got Devontae Wyatt with 1, Rashawn Gary with 1.5, and Van Ness rounding it out with that half a sack. And the Packers defense held Jared Goff to just 3.3 yards per completion. That is some pretty incredible numbers. We talked about the defensive line pressuring Goff. Big reason to that, making him dump off these short passes, could not get anything developing downfield. That would be really nice to see if the Packers can keep that up against Detroit this Thursday. But again, some injuries to this defensive line. We'll get into the Packers injury report in just a little bit and see how things might have changed. In Detroit, obviously, will be able to make adjustments, look back at that film, see what went wrong, see what went wrong and make some adjustments. But we got to move on because the Packers, and playing in Detroit where this game will be for Thanksgiving, they have not been a pretty pair at all. Packers have had struggles playing in Detroit. This is as of recent and honestly all time. Then I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this game. It's going to be tough. Let's just get into some of these. Here are the stats for you guys. The Packers, they are just 1-3 in their last 4 games in Detroit. But to note, that one win out of that 1-3 stretch did come on Thanksgiving, with the Packers beating the Lions 29-22. That's some pretty positive news. You stretch it back to the last 8 games, though, just 2-6 in those. The Packers against the Lions trail all time in games in Detroit. Detroit is 48-44-3 when they are at home against Green Bay. Now, a lot to take in there with the 1-3 stretch, that one win being on Thanksgiving, that one win being on Thanksgiving in Detroit. Those are two things that line up well, but still not a pretty stretch. And you look at going back to the week 1 point, the Packers are getting a win there. Look at the last time the Packers beat the Lions 2 times in a season. You got to go to when there were not many people in the stands, to the 2020 season. So obviously, Packers had a very good team that year, almost made the Super Bowl, will still forever be heartbreaking. But nonetheless, playing in Detroit did not really have a big Detroit home crowd because not many people were in the stands. So you got to take that stat with a grain of salt. The last time the Packers beat Detroit twice in a season being 2020, I think the lack of crowd does help a little bit. Ford Field is it's domed off. It gets really loud in there. Detroit has a passionate fan base, and they pack out their games, especially against an NFC North rival and a big one like the Green Bay Packers. So those are just a couple things to track looking into this. Obviously, it's always a new team every year. There's new guys in addition, and there's other guys that are hurt that might have been there in previous years, but now will not be on the field, like a Tucker Kraft, like a Jaden Reed. But these are just some things to note. But other things to note, we talked about the Packers a good amount. Got to go over to the Lions and how they've made some changes. Head coach Dan Campbell is taking over the play calling for this Detroit offense. I should say he has been, not just is. After that loss to the Minnesota Vikings, where the Lions were home, in fact, losing the Vikings 27-24 on November 2nd, Dan Campbell said, I'm going to take this into my own hands and control the offensive play calling. To note, Ben Johnson, the head coach of the Chicago Bears, former offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, so he's no longer in that system. He's actually on the dark side, as maybe the Lions will view it, with him joining the Bears. But Dan Campbell deciding to take over the play calling for Detroit. Now, it's been just 3 weeks since he's done that, and it's kind of interesting to track how it's went. I mean, there's some pros and there's some cons. It's just a 3-game sample. There's dominance, and then there's kind of a low game in the middle. But since then, they've played the Commanders, the Eagles, and the Giants in that order. The Commanders, the first game with Campbell taking over as the play caller, 44 points. You go to the next one of the Eagles, just 9 points. And you go to the one after that, their most recent game against the Giants, 37 points. So you go up, you go way down, and you go back up again. All those against NFC East opponents as well. I thought that was kind of interesting that they had a 3-game stretch of them, obviously not including the Cowboys within this 3-game stretch. But something to note about this stretch is Jahmyr Gibbs and his involvement that Dan Campbell is really attaining to. I do highlight just the Commanders and the Giants game because that Eagles game, that Lions offense did not look pretty, but granted the Eagles are arguably the best team in the NFL. So you're going to have some struggles, still something that they got to fix. And, the Packers did lose to the Eagles, but they're still up there near one of the best records in the NFL. So maybe you can say out of the teams in the Commanders, Eagles, and Giants, the Packers attain, they kind of relate to the Eagles the most. But the Eagles still got that win over Green Bay, still holds the edge over them. But like I said before, looking at Jahmyr Gibbs, look at these 2 games he had. I'm highlighting the Commanders game and the Giants game. In that Commanders game where they scored 44 points, Gibbs had 15 carries for 142 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also got involved in the passing game a touch with 3 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. That's pretty good. That's a pretty dang good day. But what if I told you it could get better? Let's look at this game against the Giants where Detroit got their last win just a couple of days ago, that game being in Detroit as well. Jahmyr Gibbs, 15 carries again, this time 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he got way more involved in the passing game. 11 catches, 45 yards, and a touchdown. Don't get me wrong, this game went into overtime, and he had that massive overtime play to win it, but still some pretty incredible numbers. This Lions offense scores 29.6 points per game, which is the second most in the NFL and the most in the NFC. I believe if you average out the 3 games with Campbell calling the plays, it's right around there. It might actually be 29 on the dot, which, again, it's just 3 games. It's really hard to weigh and understand how this offense will work against Green Bay because, again, great game against the Commanders. You face tougher competition in the Eagles. It sinks down far. You face lighter competition in the Giants. It rises right back up. I think the Packers will be a good middle ground test among all of those teams. Packers have played all 3 of these teams already as well. Getting a win against the Commanders, getting a win against the Giants, and losing to the Eagles, just like the Lions did. So a lot of parallels there, but definitely something to note. But with this Packers team and this Packers defense that will have to face this Dan Campbell newly led offense, we got to look at the injury report, see the guys that could be missing for this game. These are as of Tuesday for this injury report. There will obviously be more news on this. These are as of Tuesday night because you got to get through Wednesday. Usually the end of the day, those are released to give you a better picture on who will be playing in the game on Thursday. But here's the injury report as of Tuesday. Going to first start off with the players that were out versus the Vikings. Matthew Golden out with that wrist injury. He's been limited in practice on Monday and on Tuesday. Josh Jacobs battling that knee injury he obtained against the Giants in MetLife Stadium. He was limited on Monday and Tuesday as well. Quay Walker, neck injury, limited Monday and Tuesday. And Nate Hobbs with the knee injury, limited Monday and Tuesday. So none of these guys did not practice, but they're not full participation. They're limited. This is why with this releasing so early in the morning, there will be other injury news to follow later in the day. So make sure to check that for yourself because I will not be able to tell you what will happen in the future. If I could do that, that would be pretty cool. But those are definitely important to note with so many big names missing. Jacobs likely to play, I would guess, just because there seem to be hopes of him possibly playing last week, and obviously he did not. So it looked like this coming week he did not play on Sunday because he wanted to play against the Lions. He knew with the short week between Minnesota and Detroit, it would be kind of hard to come back from, and it would be nice to have those couple of days. So it's really nice the Packers could get the win and let a guy like Jacob sit out and let a guy like Emmanuel Wilson take over very, very well. Got to clap it up for him once more. I've already shouted him out a couple times in previous episodes, but man, what a game for Emmanuel Wilson. But moving on, another guy that stepped up in Isaiah McDuffie, taking, that captain patch, the role over Quay Walker. Quay Walker with his limited participation Monday and Tuesday, another guy that did not play against Minnesota with a neck injury. That's a scary one. You got to monitor that and be safe. But it is nice with these 4 names that I listed that it's all limited practice. There's none of them saying DNP next to it, meaning they did not practice. So that is very nice to see. Golden with the wrist and Nate Hobbs with the knee. Will be interesting to see who truly trots out on Ford Field on Thursday. Going to look at some of the other names. These are guys that played in the game against Minnesota but didn't have too many snaps. Carl Brooks, he did not practice on Monday or Tuesday, battling that ankle injury. He played just 7 snaps versus the Vikings, so he got in there. Didn't really have too much of effect as he played just 7 snaps. Lucas Van Ness with that foot injury, he did not practice Monday or Tuesday as well. He had just 6 snaps versus the Vikings. Savion Williams, he did not practice Monday or Tuesday with that foot injury, just 8 snaps versus the Vikings. And these snap count totals are per Green Bay Packers on SI. And going into the last name, Keyshawn Nixon, he got a neck stinger injury. He did not practice on Monday, but did practice on Tuesday. He was removed from the game against Minnesota. I believe he ran into Wyatt, who was trying to kind of hold him up as Nixon was falling, out of bounds, and he just got a stinger injury, was removed from that game. Kind of a scary one for Nixon. He played just 13 snaps before having to be removed, but it's nice to see that even though he didn't practice Monday, he did practice on Tuesday. So there will be a lot to monitor up until this game. this video, being live to you guys on Wednesday morning. Make sure to check after this all the updates that'll follow, because we know it's going to start flooding through with this game being on Thursday. But that's all I got for you guys here today. I appreciate you tuning in as always. It's a big game for the Packers. They are kind of hot, I will say. Maybe I don't want to jump the gun, but some nice wins against the Giants, a nice win against the Vikings, looking like they could be getting back on track, but this Detroit team and that Detroit offense definitely stand in the way. But once again, that's all I got for you guys. There'll be tons of more to update on and tons more to talk about after this game on Thursday. I appreciate you guys tuning in as always, and once more, as always, go Pack, go.